Welcome to Freezer Milk Podcast. I'm your host, Bridget, along with my husband, Chris. Podcast where we talk about the comedic side and serious side of parenting, life, and relationships. We are boy parents. We have two boys, Enzo and Rhett, with about a 6-year age gap between the two. You can check out our website, freezermilk.com. Also, feel free to follow us on Instagram at Freezer Milk Podcast. Thanks and hope you enjoy. I wanted to talk a little bit about the birth story of both Enzo and Rhett, and also just how much they varied as babies, like newborns.
It was a completely different story for you on both of them.
Enzo, Enzo was the baby that was the golden, child. Not really golden child, but the angel baby, I think is what they call them, or the kid that would just perfection, would sleep anywhere, barely ever cried. You could put him down anywhere, didn't give a crap if you held him, if he was self-entertaining. Like, he was just he was an accessory to your life, and it was amazing, and 110% made me feel like I was an amazing mom, an amazing parent. I was doing an amazing job raising my baby.
Then you got a rude awakening.
And then Rhett came along. And all of a sudden I realized it was not my parenting skills, that Enzo was just a really good baby. And it had nothing to do with my parenting abilities, because Rhett was not a good baby at all.
Well, we still struggle with him every day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something new. I'm still trying to, figure him out. It's a learning curve for sure. Enzo had his moments when he was younger with the fits that he would have at night, but all in all, when it came to listening or, his attitude towards things, he was very just kind of go with the flow. I'm interested to see
Rhett is not.
How Rhett turns out.
So far, he is, the only time he's go with the flow is if we are actually truly on vacation, which makes no sense whatsoever.
No. It's very interesting.
He's like an amazing travel baby and a terrible everything else baby.
It was like today when we were watching, June was here, and she was so frustrated because he would only sleep for like 16 minutes.
Yeah. Take
like 16-minute naps, and she was just like, oh my God.
It wears on her too, just to see the mega short naps, the micro naps as we call them.
We've had to try and turn it into a positive and just let her know that, this is just his biology, this is just how he's going to be, we're all going to have to get used to it, and the short naps is a tough one because it's impossible to get anything done.
No. Yeah. What do you do? It was this morning. It was 16 minutes, right?
16-minute nap. Yeah, he averages like 16 to 24-minute naps. And he's not cranky afterwards. He's wide-eyed and ready to go.
Well rested and ready for the day.
Ready for the day, but he only gets about 3 of those a day. And now he's kind of falling off. He's that third one's kind of going away too.
The fourth, he was doing the fourth
one's
because he
going away.
Micro naps.
Yeah, so
yeah,
it's very it's challenging to say the least. But talk about your birth with Enzo a little bit and how hard that was and traumatic that was for you.
Yeah, so just gonna full disclosure out there, if you are a expecting mom and have never given birth, might want to skip this episode. Both my birth experiences, really, both Enzo and Rhett, are not normal birth experiences. They're very opposite, but they are both not normal birth experiences, I would have to say. So Enzo was originally due on December 26th, and I was very nervous that I was going to have a Christmas baby. My pregnancy, I get very sick. I get the hyperemesis gravidum, so severe morning, all-day sickness, vomiting profusely for, 16 weeks plus. And aside from that, my Enzo pregnancy wasn't bad. It wasn't terrible. I could eat kind of whatever I wanted. I didn't really have any major food aversions. In the beginning, the smell of cooked meat bothered me a lot, the animal fat smell. But nothing crazy. My blood pressure was good. I didn't get preeclampsia. I didn't have the gestational diabetes. Everything was good. With Enzo's birth, I chose to do midwives as my birthing team, but do it in a hospital setting because it was my first birth, and didn't really want to go like super granola and go into like a birth center or a home birth at that point, but I knew I wanted midwives. I just did a lot of research, and for me it felt like it was a good choice. They had a very low cesarean rate, and I really wanted to stay away from having a cesarean for my first birth if I could. Well, December 26th came and went with no fanfare, and was happy to get out of the gonna have a baby on Christmas, but started to wonder when my baby would arrive. And at 41 weeks, they did stress test on baby. Everything was fine. No issues. Checked me. I was dilated a 0.5 centimeter at 41 weeks. So at 41 weeks and 2 days, 41 weeks and 3 days, they induced me in the hospital. So they had me check into the hospital. It was a Tuesday, and I don't know, we got in like 7 p.m. maybe, Enzo's dad and I. And they were like, hey, we're going to do a progesterone insert, a PG gel, going to stay for about 12 hours, try to sleep, no big deal. And should get you to, 3 centimeters hopefully by the morning. So they put that in, and for anyone that, females out there, if you have experienced this, it feels like sandpaper, and it's not fun at all, but not a huge deal. So I did that, put the belly monitors on, try to get some sleep. We all know that's a joke because baby shifts all night long, so it keeps popping off the belly monitor. And the morning came, and I was still at 0.5 centimeter. I had effaced a tiny bit more, but aside from that, there was zero dilation at all. So the midwives kind of scratched their heads and were like, all right, we're going to do round 2 of PG gel. Let's see what happens. Did another 12 hours of PG gel, and 12 hours later, I was at 1 centimeter. So I progressed a 0.5 centimeter. So at this point, we've been in the hospital already 24 hours, and I've moved a 0.5 centimeter. And there was no pain, I was not in any pain. Let me make sure people understand this, zero pain, because I was not in active labor whatsoever at this point. And Enzo was doing fine on the heart monitors, nothing was wrong. So they ended up trying a couple more things, and nothing was really working. It was really interesting. So eventually the decision was made at the 48-hour mark, since I was only at 1.5 centimeters, that we're going to do a uterine rest. So they said, hey, we're not going to do anything to your uterus for 12 hours. And not going to, have you hooked up. Just relax, try to get some sleep, etc. Did that. The next day, the midwives came to us and said, hey, we want to try something called cytotec, which they said is used to induce late-term abortions, which immediately made me, super freaked out that why would I want to take something that, kills babies, blah, blah, blah. And they explained to me, hey, Bridget, this is not a baby killer. This is something that induces labor for late-term abortions. Do your research on it. And I had to talk with Enzo's dad about it and figure out, do we trust our midwife team? Would they give me something that could put my baby at risk? Do I feel like I trust them? So I made the decision to do that. That got me to 3 centimeters. So it did work a little bit. At that point, the midwives, at this point we were into Thursday going into Friday. And midwives gave me some options. They gave me the options with the cytotec. They said, hey, we can do the cytotec. The other option is if you are done, we can do a C-section, but you do not need one. There's no medical need for it. Or we can, try PG gel again. Let us know, and that's when we decided to go the cytotec route. So Friday morning, they said, hey, awesome, congratulations, you're at 3 centimeters. We can now do what is called a double Foley balloon catheter. And I think I've described this to you before.
Yeah.
It reminds me of one of those pomegranate juice bottles, where it's kind of like a snowman-ish. Mm-hmm. So it logically makes sense that they insert part of it past your cervix, inflate that balloon, and then there's a narrow part that actually is in your cervix, and then there's part of it that's in your vaginal canal, and they inflate that. So it causes manual dilation is the best way to describe it. And it's not comfortable at all. That was very uncomfortable.
I don't envy you.
Just having babies. I did not do the right amount of prep, in my opinion, from a mental game standpoint, or even just a good amount of prep for understanding. Like, I originally went into this thinking I wanted an unmedicated birth with Enzo, but I didn't do the right amount of prep to figure out how do I use my body as a tool to help get me through the pressure of contractions, the pressure of birth, and not associate it as pain. I didn't do any of that with Enzo, with his birth experience. So going through these contractions with this manual dilation, I could feel myself just tightening up and like scrunching up my body, my mouth going very like wide, like like just tensing everywhere. And as people know that have gone through birth, if you are super tense, you are not going to make very much progress at all. So they said, hey, when the Foley balloon catheter falls out, that means you're at 5 centimeters. And when you're at 5 centimeters, we can start Pitocin, because this is Friday. You're officially at 42 weeks. You're officially 14 days late. We need to get the ball rolling. So shortly after, I felt really uncomfortable down below, and I felt like, maybe the balloon catheter was going to come out. Had them check me, and it did. It came out, and then immediately my water broke, like right in the same time frame that the double Foley balloon catheter came out. So that kind of started a clock. I didn't realize that there was this clock that exists, but in the hospital setting at the time, back in 2015, once your water broke, you had 18 hours to get a baby out before there was a massive risk of infections happening. So this started this clock of, hey, we need to get the ball rolling. It is Friday morning. We got 18 hours. Let's get going. So they started Pitocin. And everyone told me that Pitocin contractions are different than other contractions. And I was very nervous to go on Pitocin. It wasn't my ideal birth situation. It's not what I had on my birth plan of what I wanted, because the spiral of interventions that I thought could happen with going on Pitocin, as far as going into Pitocin, needing the epidural, the mixture of the epidural and the Pitocin causing the baby to go into fetal distress, which then causes you to have an emergency C-section, and it made me very, very, very anxious. I had midwives, I trusted them, I still was extremely anxious with this. So I went through the Pitocin, and they were definitely, like, it felt like my uterus was ripping apart inside of me. Don't recommend it. I, again, had not done any of the prep I needed to do for this. And didn't really, Enzo's dad was not prepared either. He didn't really know what to do to be supportive of me in that moment. And that's something that, you know me very well, and you've been with me through Rhett's birth. Like, I absolutely need my support person during the birth experience, because it's what I lean on drastically.
Well, not to mention that birth experience was pretty traumatic, so.
Yeah. So, got through about 10 hours of Pitocin, and they were upping it every half an hour, the dosage amount. The contractions, they were coming in hard, very, very intense, and at that point they were starting to couple. So my contractions were lasting about 2 minutes long, which is very long for a contraction. And then I would get about a 45-second break and have it last for another 2 minutes. And this had been going on for about 6 hours at this point. I was just sheer exhaustion. And I was like, I know I'm got to be at a 9 or a 10. Like, I was at a 5 when they checked me about halfway through that first 10 hours. I was at a 5. So I figured it's been an additional 5 hours. It's been very intense contractions. I got to be there, right? Like, we're going to have a baby very soon. So they came and checked me. And I was at 6 centimeters. And you want to...
all that work. Oh my God.
You want to talk about, like, seeing, like, the wind just go out of my sails? I was done. Mentally, like, physically. There was such a defeat on my face of all of this work, all of this exhaustion, and I've gotten nowhere, like, at all. And I was bawling my eyes out through these contractions. They were so freaking painful. And I looked at the midwives, and I looked at Enzo's dad, and I was like, I want the epidural. Like, I'm done. I could not push a baby out in an hour if you begged me to. Like, I don't have the strength. I can't do it. And the midwives kind of agreed. They said the same thing. They said, hey, look, at this point, you are so exhausted and you're in so much pain. Like, your whole body is tightening. Basically, I was just being a terrible laboring mom. Like, everything that I should have been doing, I was doing the opposite of. So because of that, I was very anxious. I was very wound up. I was very, tight and scrunched up and not relaxing, not breathing, not trying to, embrace the contraction. Instead, I was trying to, like, if I just tighten up enough, it'll go away. Grin and bear it kind of effect. So the midwife said that, like, hey, at this point, we don't typically recommend someone do pain meds if they're trying to do a pain-free birth, but at this point, you're not going to dilate because you're not relaxing. Like, your body's literally just trying to get yourself through these contractions. So about 1 a.m. Saturday morning, the anesthesiologist comes in, and I just remember, I looked at him like, are you kidding me? When he looked at me and said, oh, hey, so what you're going to do is you're going to sit on the edge of the bed, you're going to, like, curl as much into a fetal position as you can, like, sitting upright, like, so, like, curl your back out like a cat, and then don't move. And I'm going to insert this catheter and needle during the contraction. And I just looked at him like, do you not understand that I am in extreme pain? And, oh, I forgot, labor shakes. So, quick sidebar. Labor shakes are a thing that I did not know exists in labor. And I 110% thought I was having a seizure or about to have a seizure because my whole body started shaking uncontrollably, and, like, my arms, my legs, and everything were, like, contracting towards my core. And it was the scariest thing I've ever seen or gone through or experienced. And the nurses at the hospital were like, oh yeah, that's fine, honey. That's just labor shakes. You normally get it with Pitocin. None of the books.
Thanks for the warning.
None of the books. None of them said, hey, if you get labor shakes, don't panic. So, going back to the anesthesiologist, I'm having these labor shakes. My whole body's, like, seizing. My arms, everything, like, all my muscles are fatigued because my whole body is seizing from the strength of the Pitocin contractions. And the anesthesiologist is like, hey, just sit still. Try not to move. And I just looked at him like, are you kidding me right now? So Enzo's dad was like, here, I'll sit on this little rolly stool in front of you. They make the dad sit down for the epidural anyway so that they don't pass out when they see the, like, 7-inch needle that's going into the spine. So he sits down in front of me, and he's like, just squeeze my hands when you have a contraction so you try not to shake. This poor guy, his fingers turned purple. Like, he literally, the look on his face was like, she's gonna break my hand right now. Like, what is happening, Bridget? Stop! But they put the epidural in, got it all centered and placed and all of that. That was probably around, like, 1:30 a.m. And it kicked in pretty quick. They're like, hey, get some rest because you're gonna labor down. Epidural's gonna allow you to not really feel the pain. You're now on bed rest. You can't get out of bed because of it. But just get some sleep. So they came and checked me at 7 a.m. and I was at 10 centimeters, but I still had what's called a prominent lip. So Enzo was still sitting pretty high. The cervical lip had not thinned out a ton yet. And they said, hey, look, at this point, you could start pushing. You are technically at a 10, but you're going to push for 2 hours. And that doesn't benefit anybody. So they said, let's go ahead and we'll have the anesthesiologist come back in. He's going to tweak your epidural because of the fact that I had way too much movement in my legs. They asked me to, like, turn my body, and I lifted my whole, like, lower half off the bed using my legs. And they just looked at me like, you shouldn't be able to use your legs. You have a nerve block. Why can you move your legs at all? So they brought the anesthesiologist back in. He tweaked the epidural amount for me. And I labored down. And 10:45 they came back in. They said, hey, baby is right there. Let's start pushing. So 10:46 I started pushing. And typical hospital pushing, even though I had midwives, it was flat on my back, legs in the stirrups. Really not your best anatomical way to push, if you can help it. But I got very lucky. It was about 5 pushes. Enzo was born at 11:16. And he immediately peed on me the instant they laid him on my chest. Just peed everywhere. It was great. He was not huge for being 15 days past due. He was 8 pounds, 2 ounces. And he was 21.5 inches long. All of his APGAR scores were great. And I was so ecstatic. It was just bliss. And that was like the birth of Enzo. It was 5 days of hospitalization, induction, to then have a birth that was not on my birth plan.
Yeah, but you ran into complications after that, too.
We did. Yeah. So about 10 hours after Enzo was born, so almost 9:10 p.m. at night, I noticed that Enzo kept popping off. Like, I was trying to nurse him, trying to latch him, and breastfeeding does not come naturally to me. Like, that's something that a lot of moms get thrown off by, is people don't talk about how challenging this first couple of days is. Baby's trying to figure out how to latch. You're trying to figure out how to latch a child to you. Like, it's a learning curve, and it's a very steep learning curve for everybody involved. So I was trying to latch Enzo, and he just kept popping off and kind of like gasping for air. And I just felt something seems off. Maybe I'm just frustrated. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing with breastfeeding, but I feel like something's not right here. I just want somebody else to look at it. So I called the nurse in, and she came in. She looked at Enzo, looked at him trying to latch. And she's like, let me just listen to him real quick. So she gets her little tiny baby stethoscope out and listens to him and hooks up the pulse oximeter to him, and it reads out a 82%. So
what's normal for like a newborn like that, I guess?
Really, you need to be in the 90s. If you start trending into low 90s, people get concerned.
Because now, I mean, a full adult or a small child, like a 6-year-old child, should be 97. 90.
Yeah, anytime you're in the like 94 to 96 range, like you're struggling. If you drop like 93 or below at like Enzo's age now, like almost 7, we would have to take him into the emergency room if he's at like a 93 or below.
And that's why we have those
pulse oximeters
all around the house.
We do. Yay.
Story for a different day.
Yeah. So I knew, like, I'd worked in an emergency room when I was 18 as a tech, so I knew as soon as I saw the 82, I internally was like, oh shit, this is not good at all. Enzo's dad, I didn't say anything to him. He was not aware 82 is a bad number, and this postpartum nurse, I give her all the props in the world. Like, she should train everybody. She literally looks at us and she's like, hey, I want to get a second opinion. I think we should just walk him down to the special care nursery. Like, come on, like, let's all go right now. She, like, rushed us without us realizing she was rushing us, which is where I think it was amazing. So she said, hey, like, let's go down to special care nursery. I'm going to have them listen. They're the experts on this, and just make sure his lungs sound good. So I'm internally starting to panic. Okay, we're going down to the special care nursery, aka the NICU, neonatal intensive care unit, the ICU for babies. This is not good. But my irrational side was sitting there saying, they're just going to listen to him and it's going to be fine. Ignore the fact that it's an 82 on the pulse ox. Ignore the fact that he's been gasping for air. Like, it's fine. It's totally fine. He's fine. Everything's okay. So we walk down the special care nursery. And sometimes this part of the story, like, gets me choked up a little bit. So we walk down the special care nursery, and the nurse opens the doors in there, and she rolls Enzo in his little, bassinet, and immediately, like, all the lights go on in the special care nursery, and a team of about 6 nurses come over, and they just start manhandling our baby. They grab Enzo. One of them's rolling over a portable x-ray. They stretch Enzo out above the bassinet completely, like hold him like taut, straight out, horizontal, to get x-rays of his lungs and his chest. Another one brings over a crash cart and starts charging paddles and has the bag in the hand. They're ready to start bagging Enzo. And at that point, that's when I was just like, my child's gonna fucking die. Right here in front of me. My kid is gonna die. Like, I can't handle this emotionally. Like, what is happening right now? And it was so scary. Another nurse started an IV, and she was, I don't want to say she was panicked, but it was a very emergency situation, where she forgot to clamp off the IV before she turned around to grab the vial of blood to start, like, pulling blood labs for him. And so all of a sudden blood is, like, pouring out of this IV port on him. And I was just, I knew it was emotionally breaking me, and I looked at Enzo's dad and I was like, I have to step out of this room. I cannot physically handle this from an emotional standpoint without it breaking me. Like, I am in super hormone, crash from just giving birth. I have to step out, stay with the baby. I will be back in a couple minutes. I can't watch this. Like, they're getting ready to start bag our child, and, like, I can't be here watching them bag him. and watching like his little tiny body like lifeless. I can't do it. So I stepped out of the room. Enzo's dad stayed there. Everything ended up in the long run being okay. Like, Enzo is alive and well. They diagnosed him with pneumonia, and he spent 7 days in the NICU. We weren't allowed to breastfeed him for the first 4 days. They wouldn't let us hold him because his oxygen was so low. He was on oxygen, but his oxygen was so low. His respiration rate was way too high. He was not doing great at all. Between 5 days of induction, 7 days of NICU, we spent so much time at the hospital. And then day 2 of Enzo being in the NICU, I got discharged. And they didn't have a room for us to stay at the hospital. And that was...
So what, you had to go home, the baby had to stay?
Yeah. That was one of the hardest, like, car rides of my life. Enzo's dad, I told him, I said, we're not going home. I don't care if we have a hotel. I don't care if we camp out. Like, I can't walk into our apartment
without your baby.
Without, right? I can't walk into the apartment and see the nursery and not be pregnant and not have my baby in my arms. Like, I know what my hormones can handle, and they cannot handle that. So we stayed with his parents until Enzo got discharged from the NICU, but it was... I sobbed hysterically when we left the hospital that day when we got discharged without him, because I just felt like I'm leaving my child, and yes, he's not on death's door anymore, but he's not doing good. He's in the NICU. This isn't a good situation, and he's not in it because he was born preemie. He's in it because he's in severe respiratory distress. Like, needless to say, very traumatic birth experience and post-birth experience.
I'm surprised that it eventually opened up the door to even the conversation of having another child and potentially going through that again.
This is why there's a 6-year age gap.
Very true. It took six years to recover, and you're still not recovered from it.
It was so tough. You've heard the story tons of times.
Yeah.
You know.
I couldn't even imagine. I mean, it's got to be it had to have been really, really difficult. Rhett's situation was a lot different, but I could only imagine if I had to leave him at the hospital.
Do you feel like it's different for you to hear that story now that, like, you have a biological child?
Yeah, it definitely makes me quite a bit more emotional.
Yeah.
Now that I've been through it all, and how you were feeling in the moment. So I couldn't even begin to, understand like what you were going through. But I couldn't imagine it with Rhett. I'll tell you that. It would have been really tough.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think we're gonna have to save Rhett's birth story for another episode.
Yeah, I think we are. I'll have a little bit more to comment on that one.
Yeah.
Because that was definitely an interesting experience in itself. The whole birth of Rhett was extremely interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely had its ups and downs, and
to be continued.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's time, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. You can check us out at
freezermilk.com
or Instagram.
Freezer Milk Podcast.
Until next week, guys. Thanks.
Don't forget, parenting is a trip. We are all here on the journey with you together. Thanks so much for listening.